Ninjutsu is a stealth art and was originated in the 4th century by the general Sun Tzu. The ninja are skilled at silent killing. They learn how to dislocate their own joints and how to use meditation to stay underwater for prolonged periods and control their heartbeats to avoid detection. This statement is sourced from page 345 of Harper's Encyclopedia of Mystical and Paranormal Experiences, compiled by Rosemary Ellen Guiley. It's a published statement about the art, but is it true? Beginning with the first clause stating that ninjutsu is a stealth art originated by Sun Tzu, it appears that Guiley is reaching because many would assert that ninjutsu is Japanese, not Chinese. Discarding this cursory examination, though, and turning to the primary documents responsible for most of what we know of the shinobi arts, we find that the ninja themselves have attributed the origins of ninjutsu to individuals of Chinese nativity. However, these people do not include Sun Tzu. The ninjutsu manual, known as the Bansen Chukai, is vague in presenting an origin story of the ninja arts, stating that they appeared along with all other warrior arts in China under the reign of Fu Zi in the 28th century BC, almost 5,000 years ago, then going on to elaborate on the 13th chapter of Sun Tzu's Art of War as one later example of how the principles of ninjutsu were written about in early Chinese texts. But Sun Tzu did not invent ninjutsu. His writings are simply some of the most well-known that contain elements of the art. If you were to ask one 17th century ninja known as Fujibayashi Yasutake where ninjutsu came from, he would tell you that ancient China is the root where the essence of the art could be found. And it is this essence that is mistakenly attributed to Sun Tzu by Guiley, probably because the use of spies is a chapter in Sun Tzu's Art of War that we can all point to if asked, what is ninjutsu? But it is incorrect to say Sun Tzu is the origin of the art. Now, is it an art of stealth? It depends on what we mean by stealth. If we were going to define a tree by its fruits, we may look to the book The Tiger's Way, published by military trainer, researcher, and Vietnam veteran John H. Poole, who has published an extensive list of skills attributed to the ninja which he claims should be taught to members of the U.S. infantry to give them a fighting chance against Eastern armies. This list includes arts like Anko Kutoshi Jutsu, the art of seeing in the dark, which involves techniques for adapting human sight to the aphotic depths of shadows, preserving night vision by keeping one eye closed when near or looking into light, using peripheral vision and the rod cells of the human eye to scan an object in the dark by moving the head side to side, and other defocusing exercises meant to enhance sight in shadow, in addition to an awareness to watch for the presence of unexplained shadows in one's operating environment, all of which relate to stealth by favoring darkness to conceal one's activities from the enemy. Then there's Tenman and Chiman, arts for predicting weather and knowing the advantages or disadvantages of terrain, respectively. Subsumed under these arts are knowledge and techniques for avoiding detection, such as keeping the body profile under the horizon when moving, identifying cover and concealment on the terrain, pivot movements to dive behind objects at sharp angles or to break up the line of track, dissolving into shadow and moving between shadows to stay concealed. The moon and clouds were given special attention as the light from above could shift terrain appearance in the dark and open the possibility that one may be seen. So too, rain, thunder, snow, fog, and mist could all offer advantageous conditions for movement and stealth, which is why shinobi had the skill set of a minor meteorologist. Then there is Jisen Seiko Gijutsu, which is the art of scouting by stealth while the terrain is occupied with enemies lurking about. And so shinobi were aware of the importance of not crossing roads unless they had to, and if crossing was necessary, to only do so in a low-lying area, or where the road was covered by shadow, trees, or elevated terrain. They learned to run on the toes of their feet to stay light and quiet, and would also practice moving so slow in subdued light that the movement could not be discerned by the eyes of an enemy sentry. Their movement techniques were typically geared for stealth. To reduce the sound of their footsteps on wooden floors, special sandals donned with cotton floss were used, or an obi sash was unrolled and walked on. A rolling step was used for rocky terrain or loose dirt, and a sideways step called yoko oruki was employed for narrow alleys or passageways, and for flattening the body against a wall to make use of the slight shadows produced beneath the eaves of buildings. If one needed to stay above the view of guards, special sets of tools called nekote were used to assist the in-nin shinobi agent with clinging to rafters and ceilings, a technique that has much to say about a ninja's upper body conditioning. Their lower body required just as much attention for movement techniques up vertical surfaces, such as running up walls, a skill found within the art of shoten-no-jutsu. Upper and lower body strength were also combined for things like climbing up limbless trees, scaling ramparts, and moving over walls without equipment or assisted by tools like bashigo, loop, spider, and hanging ladders. All of these methods of moving over perimeter obstacles are unconventional for the obvious reason that the shinobi is not supposed to be there, which is another blatant allusion to their stealth function. Furthermore, the dragon crawl, serpent crawl, use of nekote, ladders, distorting one's silhouette with a cape, jinton jutsu or hiding in shadows, skills for obscuring one's own presence or tonke no jutsu, and various elemental escape strategies turned gotan po all convey the implication that shinobi were trained in these arts by senior instructors, as opposed to the idea that they were skills one could just pick up in a moment. The body conditioning alone, one may surmise, would have required months to years of training, which is why Poole asserts that ninja were the products of, quote, a highly systematic and scientific method of secret espionage, danger prevention, and advanced combat, end quote. The credentials of Poole are behind this statement, consisting of 28 years as a commissioned and non-commissioned officer in the United States Marine Corps, multiple tours as a platoon commander in Vietnam, and a lengthy service record as a small unit infantry tactics instructor, among other things. But we need not rest our case on the Tiger's Way, for the primary ninjutsu manuals all convey the very things Poole has written about. Even Anthony Cummins of the Ninjutsu research team, which has provided the world with English translations of ninjutsu documents, has published a statement about the significance of said documents, claiming that they, quote, allow a single human to train diligently to become a clandestine operative with knowledge that rivals modern special forces, with skills that have relevance for modern espionage and clandestine warfare even today. End quote. If you take issue with statements like these, recognize that Poole and Cummins have a wealth of knowledge and experience to back up their words. I think one reason why many are inclined to see ninjutsu as just a watered-down art for people that love black pajamas is because the drive for profit and commercial packaging of an art originally meant for dangerous times has reduced the quality of what may be taught. If you wish to know what I mean in more detail, seek out the videos below. I don't think it is necessarily a bad thing that ninjutsu dojos don't teach how to kill another human being silently, or how to burn down entire villages, or how to build explosives, for it would be arguably morally reprehensible and illegal to do so. But it would be nice if the idea of ninjutsu as a martial art in the pugilistic sense just disappeared altogether. And I don't think this can be accomplished without referencing historical documents that speak of how dark shinobi-no-jutsu really was. Before I go off on a tangent though, let's return to our assessment of Guiley's statement. We see how inaccurate information about a topic can be widely published and disseminated, leading to a lot of people consuming falsehood and spreading it to others, resulting in ninjutsu getting a bad rap. Guiley is right about ninjutsu on a few points, but she needed better sources for that entry in an encyclopedia, and the best sources are the documents written by ninja themselves. ChatGPT is not the best source, nor is any AI language model, and I would also be very skeptical of anything promulgated on YouTube that uses an artificial, non-human voice and doesn't cite any sources at all. There is no one who has attained mastery of every conceivable art under the sun, and and finding one who has mastered several is a rare find indeed. But there are many that have mastered or are proficient in at least one art. Just as an array of colors and tapestry holds the potential to become a work of art, bringing a variety of talented individuals together under one aegis can lead to the accomplishment of great things. Some are athletic, some are social chameleons, others are technologically inclined, and there are even those skilled in thievery. Every person has weaknesses and strengths. It is the job of the shinobi-no-mono, or boss of the ninja team, to know how to use the strengths and weaknesses of his or her ninja to fulfill the job requirements given by the higher-ups. The role of the shinobi job boss has been likened to that of the kaname of a fan that bands all of the parts of the fan together. If the kaname is faulty or is removed, the fan falls apart and loses its function. If the head of the shinobi team is not talented in commanding, organizing, and leading the shinobi at his or her disposal, the ninjutsu strategies that are devised will be rendered feckless in the end. The shinobi-no-mono must thoroughly understand the proclivities and hearts of his ninja. This is known as Kaname no Daiji. Let us souse our minds with the waters of this principle by using the Gando burglar raid as an example. To execute this kind of attack, the shinobi commander will need to select ninja to fulfill the job categories of watchmen, combatants, and signaling. Watchmen are also called hari, and their role is to set up a perimeter around the enemy quarters and keep the shinobi team apprised of the situation outside of the operation zone, such as whether reinforcements are arriving unexpectedly or anything else that could cause problems for the main performers and combatants. These hari are placed at every route into the target zone, and the job boss must select for this role shinobi that are calm, patient, and don't become scared easily. It is said in the extant ninjutsu texts that if a coward is selected as a hari, the security of the whole raid will be jeopardized because the hari might abandon his post, fail to inform insiders of the situation outside, and flee from the area, all due to fear and impatience. Shinobi need to be patient. Hari need to be doubly so. The job boss will also need to select koshi, those who handle arson implements, and hizo, those who help the koshi. These men must be skilled in handling fire and work so efficiently together it is as if they are one mind. The shinobi commander must also select those who will serve as doze, the role of force. These men must have skill with spears, bows, and swords. Their specialty should include handling these tools in close quarters situations. As the 17th century ninja Fujibayashi Yasutake tells us, fighting within a building is likely during a Gando burglar raid. Lastly, those who can play the shakuhachi flute or other instruments for signaling must be selected. All shinobi must be instructed on what signals are to be used, what they mean, and signalers must not fail to communicate. Prior to planning the raid, the commander would send out meakashi, which are scouts that are good at observing the enemy and telling the job boss what he or she needs to know about the status of the enemy that could factor into alterations of the tactics used in the raid. So you see, shinobi are not all one and the same. They all have differences in stature, physical aptitudes, mental acuteness, social connections, language ability, and profession and trade considerations that translate into their degree of spiritual adeptness, tool and weapon proficiency, suitability for certain disguises, and every other quality necessitated by the job. Shinobi work best by themselves, but to accomplish large tasks, teamwork is fundamental to ninjutsu. All of this flows out of the Yokan Kajo Demoko Kugi scrolls of the shinobi. To be a leader of ninja, one must have eyes to see and ears to hear what makes each of his or her shinobi exceptional and how to use their strengths. For example, one would not use a tajikara or a male ninja to seduce an enemy officer, unless he's into that sort of thing. No, instead you'd send a kunoichi. One would not send a ninja that has not mastered picking joshi padlocks if a stealthy burglary was called for, and one would certainly not send a spy among the occupants of a temple who knows nothing about Buddhism, Shintoism, or Shugendo. And so the ninja Notori Masazumi made the remark that learning ninjutsu is like running into a great void. You will always find yourself wanting to fill it with knowledge of more arts and skills than you could possibly master in your lifetime. You will always find yourself wanting to learn more, and it is a mark of a true ninja to try to learn every art that you can, for you do not know what will prove useful to you later. Those who master many arts are jonin, and finding them is again difficult. So rather than rely on the limitations of a single person, a shinobi master brings the talents and skills he or she needs together through unification, a team, and a community. You may be inclined to think that the stealth of a shinobi is to be found in methods of training sokushin-ho, or silent footstep techniques like nuki-ashi, shinobi-ashi, and yoko-aruki. But the stealth potentials of the ninja are much deeper than this, involving a number of arts that you've probably never heard of, like Henso no Jutsu, Tenmon, Chimon, Kansatsu, Kyomei, Onshin, Kugutsu, Inton no Jutsu, and Kakurumi no Jutsu. I was asked by a subscriber to make a video on a ninja's physical stealth discipline, so get ready to become acquainted with the aforementioned arts as we proceed, because all of them comprise the stealth discipline in ninjutsu. What do we mean by the term stealth? The word is in fact a descriptor of a relationship between two or more parties. The essence of this relationship is in the dynamic of one party searching or leaving the senses open to stimuli that indicate the presence of a threat, while the other party makes the effort to stay off the radar, so to speak, of the opposition's sensory fields. Stealth involves keeping oneself concealed, one way or another, from the sight, taste, touch, hearing, and smelling senses of those around you. But most important for a shinobi of feudal Japan, stealth is the ability to trick the perceptions of trained observers. The trick being to convince the minds of the enemies, through their sense impressions and composite perceptions, that a shinobi isn't really there. Staying out of their mind's awareness is more than hiding the physical form. It also demands concealing signatures of presence, like broken twigs, footprints, trash and waste, fire, light, and smoke, the smell of the body and one's equipment, the sounds that one makes when moving, trees that have been cut, rocks that have been displaced, and even information leaks with no identifiable source. One who has effectively eliminated or concealed his or her presence signatures has made their activities appear as natural products of the environment. Trails that a shinobi has walked on are to be perceived as game trails of animals. Areas where a shinobi has slept are to be perceived as bedding grounds for deer. On the roads, a shinobi is just another peasant, while among the enemy, he is the rain, the wind, and the thunder. So now you may begin to see that the stealth of the ninja was not just about silent footsteps and hiding on rooftops. It was really about blending into the sights and sounds of the operating area. In the words of the shinobi derived from the Bonsen Shukai of 1676, competent ninja make no sound, leave no smell, and get no fame or honor for their bravery, and their activities will produce results that appear as natural as nature itself. One way such stealth was achieved is by adhering to a principle known as kyomei, or harmonizing one's presence and movements with what is already occurring in an environment. Kyomei translates into English as sympathy or resonance. Kyomei may be thought of as an overarching principle that is the root for all stealth techniques, as it is chiefly concerned with harmonizing one's presence with the operating environment. No matter where the shinobi is, or what the mission may be, Kyomei is a reminder that the best approach to stealth is to become the background noise and activity. The principle of Kyomei is timeless, and for that reason we find it in the modern concept of the gray man, popular in preparedness content. To be the gray man is about not standing out in an urban setting by dressing in neutral colors and carrying gear in non-tactical enclosures. The principle of this concept being to look like everyone else so as not to attract unnecessary attention. The gray man concept is paralleled in Ninjutsu's Shinobi-irui no Koto, which predates the notion of the gray man by at least 400 years. Shinobi-irui no Koto is found in the Hoi no Maki volume of principles in the Ninjutsu scrolls of Chikamatsu Shigenori, who met with and recorded the Kuden transmissions of Koga Ninjutsu from Master Kimura in the year of 1719. The tradition states that shinobi should select clothes and items that will not stand out in the province they are spying in, being sure to study how people dress, how they act, and even how they speak. According to this tradition, shinobi would employ a technique of wearing a double kimono, with one matching the clothing style of the people in the area, while the other, worn underneath, was used to change into so as to appear as an outsider if necessary, or to hastily alter an appearance. In the era of the ninja, people could accurately judge what province you were from based on hairstyle and clothing, and so a shinobi had to take these details into account to achieve kyome among the locals. As a general rule, if you do not stand out, you will not be remembered. This is an important aspect of kyome in an urban environment, and we continue to encounter its relevance in the gray man tactics of today. As they say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. When in Owari province, do as the Owari do. And when in natural environments, act like the locals. Hunt, but avoid being hunted. Make yourself scarce, and know the highways of the land animal. Kyome, when applied to the natural world, requires studying the color scheme, sounds, and weather impacting the area. Although weather forecasting and estimating its advantages is a separate ninjutsu discipline called tenmon, its stealth aspects are rooted in kyome. For example, wind and rain were deemed favorable to the stealth movements of an nin shinobi. Wind will mask the inevitable sounds you make when walking on dead leaves and debris, and rain softens the ground, further reducing the noise of footsteps. By harmonizing activity with gusts of wind and bouts of thunder, the shinobi becomes the forest, the mountain, the water, and the darkness. The principle of kyome is at the root of all stealth disciplines. From kyome comes the creation of myriad techniques for hiding oneself from the enemy, and these techniques were collectively referred to by the shinobi as magakure. From kyome, we receive magakure, and from magakure branches henso no jutsu, inton no jutsu, and every other stealth art and technique of ninjutsu. Disharmony stands out to the ear. Harmony is to be one with the chords of reality. I've been delving into Hoyer's The Psychology of Intelligence Analysis lately, and he states in there a quote from Herbert Simon in his 1957 book, Models of Man, that the human mind cannot cope directly with the complexity of our world, and because of its limits and mental capacity, we must create simplistic models of how we interpret the reality around us. Our rationality is limited. It is bound by how much we can process and by the mental model of the world we must construct to cope with this complexity. Quote, what people perceive, how readily they perceive it, and how they process information after receiving it are all strongly influenced by past experience, education, cultural values, biases, analytical role requirements, and organizational norms, as well as by the specifics of the information received. Keep this in mind as I speak about the observation skills of a shinobi-no-mono. A shinobi must have a good memory, not just for recalling details of a conversation or where to find water, but especially for learning new material or catching incongruencies between a subject's overt behavior and speech. The principle of mitsume, observing with intensity, and kikitsume, listening with intensity, are at play in this kind of situation, wherein the shinobi applies what is known of a subject to the conversation at hand. If what is communicated contradicts what has previously been observed, a shinobi will pick up on deceit and know when Kozen speech is being used as a tool of manipulation to shift suspicion or keep secrets in the dark. Memory is vital to this ability, and it is fed by the human senses. Contrary to what is conventional thought, there is more than one type of memory. Cognitive psychology teaches us that environmental inputs pour into a sensory register prior to being encoded by the brain. Each sense has its own register. Sight corresponds to iconic memory. Sound corresponds to echoic memory. Touch corresponds to haptic memory. Smell corresponds to olfactory memory, and taste corresponds to gustatory memory. When combined, these registers provide a highly detailed snapshot of what is occurring in one's environment. But without focus and attention, the contents of these registers are constantly wiped every few seconds or so. Short-term memories are created when we focus on select contents of the sensory register and discard information not relevant to what we are paying attention to. The smell of fire or rain, the sudden cessation of sound in a natural biome, Furtive movements by an individual we are observing, and sudden changes in ambient temperature are examples of stimuli that push their way into conscious awareness so that mental processing of them may begin. This modal model of memory, as it is called by psychologists, serves to instruct us as to why it is important to not allow the senses to become dull. The senses are gateways to the mind, and so if they are vitiated, the mind will not be quick on the uptake of what is happening in an environment. Too much sound deafens the ears. Too much seasoned food dulls the palate. Engage in unrestrained sensual pleasure, and it will become harder to climax. Flowers are more fragrant if you do not smell them all the time, and seeing too much can manifest as the inability to see anything at all. This is something to ponder. The ninja Fujibayashi Yasutake speaks to us from the past, telling us that the lower mind will be easily affected by what the eye sees. It will worry about what the ear hears. It will be absorbed in what the nose smells and indulge in the tastes of the tongue and sensations of lust. A shinobi must control the mind by respecting the senses as tools that keep the mind sharp. If they are blunt, a shinobi cannot cut through what is false, cannot cherish what is truly valuable, and cannot see what is right in front of him. To create good memories, the shinobi must be grateful for what the senses provide. Concealing one's heart. This can be easy. Concealing one's form is another matter. True stealth is all about presence, yet seeming not to be present at all. To hide one's thoughts and intentions requires speech that is terse and laconic, if at all put forth. And the language of the body must come under conscious control through a disciplined focus on autonomic functions. In time, the breath, autonomic responses to anxiety like sweating and even heartbeat, may be regulated through the will, particularly when one recognizes that much of what the body gives away is due to the thoughts of the person. The thoughts of fear, anger and hostility, love and kindness may all be intuited by tracing the exterior behavior of a person back to the mind within. You could say that ripples always have a source. Now, the stealth of the shinobi takes this principle to heart, giving mind to the diligent removal of traces in the world. When it comes to concealing one's physical form, rather than relying on a dedicated camouflaged uniform or the thick envelope of darkness, a shinobi refines techniques that are found in the following principles. If you've been on this channel for a while, you might have heard some of these already. It is hard to see clearly that which is small. Evincing a humble ego given over to the necessity of humility, while disguised as a lowly person, is one way this principle may be applied. The gregarious, egotistical, and highly extroverted may find it more difficult to don a humiliating facade, yet the reward is that by appearing small, your function as a shinobi is hard to perceive. This principle pertains to hiding the physical form as well. While standing, there is more of us for an observer to see, whereas if we crouch or lie down, our form, relative to the observer's perspective, reduces considerably in size. Ongyo Jutsu uses this principle by advising a shinobi to crouch low and hide the face when happened upon by enemy patrols. But another principle is added, that of imitation. The shinobi imitates the environment, pretending to be a rock, a tree, or the many grasses of a field. The human form is hidden by trying to take on the characteristics of what is around us, and thereby appear like we belong there, because we have shed the skin of what screams human, at least to the observer. This principle of imitating nature is where we get camouflage, painted faces that look like grasses and leaves, clothing that imitates the colors of the natural environment, and behavior that blends in with the ambiance of the norms of plant and animal life. At night, we imitate darkness by wearing dark clothes, whereas by day, we let the many things of the earth guide our adherence to kyome, or harmony with the environment. But there is yet another principle of stealth to be aware of. This is knowing the mind of the observer. Even if you manage to make yourself small and are as silent as the wind and trees, even if you have merged with the environment, at some point you will have to fulfill bodily necessities and functions. You will have to piss, you will have to eat, and eventually you will have to move. Unlike animals who don't have to care where they leave their tracks, a human being hunted by another human does. If the observer we are trying to deceive is skilled, he or she will know the difference between a plant that was browsed by a deer or one disturbed by a human entity. The observer may have dogs at his or her disposal, making the possibility that a shinobi is found much higher, and simple camouflage cannot thwart the abilities of high technology like thermal and ground sensors. More is required of a shinobi when dealing with an intelligent and experienced observer, so beware that who the shinobi is hiding from is very important. We can get the best idea of the methods of a shinobi's stealth by looking at the security measures he or she had to bypass to gain entrance to an enemy castle or camp at night. We have a great resource for this task in the Bansen Shukai, wherein we receive instruction of how ninja themselves would have defended a camp against enemy shinobi infiltrators. In general, a camp perimeter may be divided into Kidashi, the area immediately outside the camp, and the Tobari, the area beyond the Kadashi, situated 30 to 50 ken or 60 to 100 meters from the inside perimeter of the camp. Within the Kadashi, guards are placed 5 to 7 ken, 10 to 13 meters, outside the inner perimeter, in guard stations, and are instructed to keep a strict watch in rotating 2-hour shifts. The camp interior is lit with watchfires. All guards were instructed to carry a lantern, except dark patrols that were instructed to follow the light patrol and engage in kamaritsuke, or detection of kamari ambush troops, as well as shinobi infiltrators. The interior of the camp would be patrolled by at least 3 foot soldiers, with orders to check latrines, alleys, all rooms, wall recesses, gutters, wooded areas, rubbish piles, and basically any other good hiding place for a shinobi. It's not like one could just creep in there and hide in any shadow. Perimeter security could include tsuruyoshi and other traps like caltrips and ashikarami trip ropes that have been spoken about on this channel. And then there were the Togiki listening scout units, consisting of Kagi, warriors with a good sense of smell, and Monogiki, warriors with excellent hearing. These units would be sent out every night to patrol the darkness and spaced 30 ken or 60 meters apart around the camp exterior. In addition to these measures, we know that an infiltrating shinobi would also have to deal with dogs, as the Togiki listening units were given specific instruction to pay mind to the sounds of the dogs as they listened for shinobi. And so you see that the basic camp security rundown and review consisted of watchfires, security-conscious foot soldiers, horse-mounted warriors, walls, traps, lanterns, torches, passwords, Kagi and Monogiki scouts, dark patrols, light patrols, and guard dogs. To get past all of this, a shinobi would have had to have skill indeed. The Yokon Kajo Demoku Kugi scrolls of the Iga and Koka ninja contains a few traditions that seem to imply an endurance and strength of the physical body that I don't think gets talked about much in the ninjutsu community nowadays. In a previous video, titled An Overlooked Skill of the Ninja, I rendered a hypothesis concerning the physical training of a shinobi that was predicated on the long-standing requirements of military forces. Specifically, I said that warriors need to be capable of running short and long distances, often while carrying loads over varying terrain. I also asserted that this was just as much true for the samurai as well as shinobi. Rather than build up the body for aesthetics, the physical training of these feudal warriors was oriented towards functional performance in activities such as carrying a message at speed or moving under the weight of armor and weapons with agility and precision. A lower body conditioned to move quickly and over long distances was essential not only for battle maneuvers, but particularly for hikyaku or foot messengers trained in shinobi-no-jutsu. Running was more than a fitness activity, it was literally their occupation. The tradition of the movement of clouds, or Anko Nusute, explicitly calls for the use of hikyaku to swiftly communicate urgent messages during covert operation. Before we get into the details of shinobi hikyaku, we should look at these messengers in general, as they have been used extensively throughout Japan's feudal history. The term hikyaku is comprised of 2 ideograms. The first, hi, meaning to fly or flying, fast, rapid, and swift, and the lower ideogram, kyaku, represents legs or feet. Thus, hikyaku may be translated as flying feet or swift legs. Hikyaku were employed for a variety of courier tasks since at least the Kamakura period, and their services were expanded during the Edo period. While there were a variety of hikyaku types, including the horse-mounted Ropora or Uma hikyaku, our main interest here is in the foot-to-ground messengers, for the inferences we can draw from them regarding shinobi hikyaku training. Hikyaku messengers are said to have sometimes traveled in pairs, so if one was injured, the other could continue on and get the message or goods carried in a wooden box fixed to a bamboo pole to their destination. They could run an estimated average of 80 miles a day, and at one time had established a communications network covering Ezo, or today's Hokkaido, all the way to Nagasaki in the southwest. For a higher fee, some express hikyaku could provide delivery service from Osaka to Edo, a distance of roughly 500 kilometers or 312 miles in 5 to 3.5 days. If single runners were not used, then relay stations called shukuba, spaced 6 to 10 miles apart, housed fresh runners that would take over the message in a handoff, thus permitting greater speed of conveyance than could be achieved with a single endurance runner. Hikyaku would travel in inclement weather and even at night over mountainous terrain. The training regimen for hikyaku therefore included long-distance running, trail running through the mountains, and weighted running, as they often carried parcels of various sizes. When they did all this running, either barefoot or in straw waraji sandals, as rubber soles and enclosed toe boots did not exist yet. Now turning from hikyaku communicators as a public service to the context of ninjutsu's tradition of moving clouds, which advises on the use of hikyaku to carry a sensitive message to one's allies during conflict, the question arises, were these hikyaku shinobi? Consider that the tradition also states the messengers should, upon being questioned, state they are communicating changes in market values of rice in different provinces. Reading deeper then, we can reasonably infer that the messengers are operating under circumstances of increased surveillance and are subjects to search and questioning by authorities in the area. We can therefore also infer that the sensitive message is either 1. Carried on the messenger or in the parcel and is encoded in such a way that suspicion is not raised once it is seized for inspection, or 2. The message is hidden on the messenger or within the mind of the hikyaku. If the former is the case, then the hikyaku need not be a shinobi. But if the latter is true, then the hikyaku is likely a shinobi, especially because the tradition calls for concealment of the messenger's true purpose with a cover story, and one would not ask just anyone to do this. Definitely not some random public service hikyaku, for a solid trust in the individual is required. And this is where we can posit that the messengers spoken of in the Iga shinobi tradition of moving clouds were actually highly trusted shinobi, operating a front business of hikyaku, all the while gathering information about enemy movements or political intelligence throughout Japan under the guise of delivery men, providing a totally legal and normal service that was in vogue during the time. And if you happen to be a shinobi in the employ of this hikyaku-mediated intelligence front, you can bet you did a lot of running. We can therefore conclude on this basis that ninjutsu students ought to take up running as a basic method of physical training, if not for its health benefits and functional movement, suited to a variety of purposes, then at least to honor the tradition of moving clouds, carrying secret messages through sleet, snow, rain, and mountainous terrain in the dark and despite pain to keep allies apprised of the situation. In closing, I want to remark on the brilliance of using a hikyaku front to satisfy intelligence requirements. Rather than send an Indian shinobi in dark garb across enemy lines to spy out the happenings in a province, better to use hikyaku that let you go anywhere without raising any suspicion and move rapidly by nature of the business itself. This serves as an example of how even during conflict, private sector services can augment intelligence collection capabilities. It kind of reminds me of the 150,000 or so business enterprises of China that are doing just that. But I'll save this notion for another video. Till next time. I know there are many of you that are aware that ninjutsu is not a hand-to-hand combat system, and you know that the essence of the art would not be found in deception, disguises, and criminal behavior. Let me say that ninjutsu is important to me because it has equipped me with a most valuable perspective through which I view the world. You know, people try to deceive you, to manipulate you, to trick you. This art teaches you to be aware of the survival games humans play with one another every day. It informs on the necessity of understanding the motivations for the behavior we see in other people, how everyone wears a mask to a certain degree in relation to what they are trying to gain. You come to find that vituperation, flattery, sensual appearances, the colors and tones that people display can all be traced back to a psychological source, an origin within the mind of the individual and the collective whole that ripples out in the choices we make and actions we take. Prior to the systematized scientific inquiry into the nature of the human mind, shinobi were already studying human emotion with the intent of knowing what the mind of an intelligence target may be like. This is evident in their art of Shinso no Kodo, recorded in the Shoninki of the 17th century as a way to know the mind through what we see in conduct and what we ourselves feel. In a world where authenticity is hard to find, a world where everyone is trying to make a buck and play the game of material acquisition and status peacocking as if the measure of a good life is to be found in these things, the survival value of ninjutsu could not be more apparent. You need to be able to see through people's bullshit. You need to know what motivates behavior so you can predict threat potentials around you. You need ninjutsu because at its core, the art is about knowing the difference between what is real and what is not, how to find strength in our weaknesses and identify weaknesses in what is strong. But most importantly, ninjutsu is about mastering darkness to fight darkness and see truth when it is not supposed to be seen. What else could be the purpose of questioning your spies about topics they know nothing about, other than to see who feeds you misinformation or who is loyal and correct? Those who conceal treachery will speak of things they have no knowledge of. In a world where shinobi must know who in his own sect may be a double agent, one must become adept at spotting the lie. For the ninja of history, this was of grave importance. I think people can benefit from studying ninjutsu, particularly for the value it adds to human relationships. It also helps us by hinting at the propaganda that may be present in our environment. Ninjutsu teaches that lies are powerful. You can get people to kill one another over a simple lie. Take Chirashi Gaki, a tradition of the ninja that involves writing and distributing false letters among the enemy, conveying messages that make it seem like the enemy cannot trust one another. Letters that spread rumors like how a respected officer has flipped sides, or that an attack by agents who have penetrated the ranks is imminent. This method of propaganda by sending arrow letters into a camp would produce confusion to the point that the enemy becomes divided by their paranoia oriented to the potential of shadows in their midst. Lies can kill. We should be aware that even though we are not operating in an environment of intelligence networks like the shinobi of old, the ability to analyze what we see and hear with a critical eye and ear is important in an age where everything is artificial, even truth. The human species lives in an era where human pollution has penetrated to the greatest depths of the earth. In fact, recently, an intact beer bottle was photographed in the Marianas Trench. If the pollution of our civilization has gone this deep, how much more so has the depths of our minds been affected? You study ninjutsu, you will find that what people call critical thinking is intrinsic to espionage. Knowing how to distinguish truth from specious reasoning, sophistry, and outright propaganda is inherent to the art. This is why I say ninjutsu students should take up studying propaganda, as well as a course in logic and rhetoric. I am not proclaiming to be a paragon of such things. I am just asserting that if you value ninjutsu, you must study them. There are so many things that are today associated with the ninja of history, from motorcycles and food processors to obstacle courses, martial arts dojos, and the fit physique. But what I want you to associate with the ninja, indeed what I myself perceive to be the essence of a shinobi, is finding truth, finding what is false, and taking one's own secrets to the grave, especially for a higher cause. I suppose that a higher cause is to communicate to those of you that follow the path that your mind is your greatest tool, and you must sharpen it against the deceptions of the world. Do not let artificial intelligence replace your own reason. Reflect on how you should live your life, not how the world wants you to live it. Maybe uplift the human spirit. I think that it is better to live absurdly, despite the apparent meaninglessness of it all, than die what they call a dog's death from depression and self-deletion. I've been there. You might get there too, and I want to say you can find a better way out, further down the path, maybe even helping others along the way, rather than submitting to the pressure of implosion or lashing out in rage. The way I see it, psychological damage is a burden of service. If you fix what is broken within you, this will lay a path with signposts for others who seek thaumaturgy for similar maladies. While studying mass killers, I have noticed that what they do not fix internally manifests as the opposite. Rather than becoming a force for lifting others up, their internal suffering is transmuted only in self-annihilation. Like a collapsed star, their gravity takes others with them into the abyss, often walked into by ignorance and a lack of insight into their own mental conditions. We all know soldiers kill and criminals kill. Sometimes you can't tell the difference between them. So, jus in bello, justice in war. Humans have always been finding justifications for destroying others. Mental suffering and a bloodlust is not a good reason. If you live in a war environment where it is kill or be killed, the justification is easier to find, and one could argue that some of our urban concrete jungles have dynamics akin to war zones. Many of us are just trying to survive, surviving in the dark underground of criminal networks. But if I have your ear, don't throw your life away. Find another way to fight your suffering. Like a stoic, hell, even like a shinobi. Endure because you're supposed to be stronger than what you are being forced to put up with. Why cut a life short when there is always more to learn? This is loaded with value judgments, I know, but it's what I want to say. My hope is that this rhetoric can help someone out there, and for those who need to hear it, shinobi knew how to take their secrets to their graves. This is a burden of service too. Interpret it as you will. I intentionally leave it here for you. A writing utensil for taking notes was one of the 7 items carried by a shinobi. Writing is a memory aid and a means of externalizing a problem into a visual format to allow the mind to work on it without the limitation of holding many memory elements in the mind at once. Human short-term memory is limited, so writing things down to keep track of them as a situation increases in complexity is useful. Now, anytime a thing is written down, the security of the collected information is at risk. You are making a paper trail. One remedy to this problem is to write in code, if you have to write at all. And when the collected information has been communicated, destroy the copy. If writing aids aren't available, one must rely on human memory. Cognitive science has shown that short-term memory is limited on average to a 7 to 10 item capacity. To remember more, one must use a method of encoding the information into easily retrievable chunks. One method is to assign a letter to a number value, 0 through 9, and to create words or phrases with the substitutions. I find this method useful for remembering license plates and other numerical information like phone numbers and various digit sequences. Here is a table of the alphanumeric number to letter substitutions derived from Dennis Rourke's The Lost Art of Human Memory. Notice that there are no vowels. Vowels are added to create words. For example, a plate reading L4792183 can be encoded as lore gap, not fame. After memorizing the table here, and with constant practice, one may begin to hold onto large digit sequences with ease. Just don't forget the phrase that you have assigned to the sequence. Sot no ku. The method of withdrawing one's presence from a house or other target area by stealth occurs after a successful infiltration. This is a most vulnerable interval for a shinobi and is a truth that is counterintuitive. Why would the time of greatest danger be after the breaking and entering and trespass into the sphere of the enemy has already occurred? The answer to this question is more related to the psychology and chi, or ki, of the infiltrator than to the watchful acumen of enemy guards. Handed down to us from the ninja of Iga and Koga are psychological insights into how the internal state of the infiltrator affects the outcome of their exfiltration. We are told at the beginning of a mission the chi and mental state is strong, with robust resolve to fight the enemy even unto death if one is detected. The initial stages of an infiltration present less risk because one is highly attentive to the actions being taken to steal in without inducing a single ripple of alarm. For this reason, the shinobi is quite dangerous. In this state of fortified chi, one's resolve will enable the immediate silencing of anyone that attempts to raise alarm in the incipient moments of the infiltration. The quality of the mind of a shinobi in this mental state is encapsulated in Uchi-no-ki, Soto-no-ki, no Sute, where we find the phrase, "let them all come." We can bear any arrow, any shot, or shield. But the way-going affair of the agent after the work is done has the propensity to flip the polarity of the agent's chi from that of yo to in, from a resolve to fight right into the umbra of death to a follow-through of retreat to save one's skin that, if not corrected, we are told, can result in the death one is endeavoring to avoid. The culmination of the shadow work becomes a fixed thought, and thus one falls into the mental trap of cudgeling one's brains over nothing more than escaping from the enemy sphere before one is detected. The mind slackens, and habitude marks one's strategy for dealing with potential opposition on the way out. This inattentiveness means the shinobi may not pick up on enemies, darkled in their pursuit of the agent and preparing to strike down the ninja, who is afflicted with tunnel vision of the finish line. This teaching of chi-mediated mental states arrives to us with an admonition to not lose the strength of mind characteristic of enthusiastic and resolute beginnings, but preserve the readiness to fight through the enemy at the outset and even on the way out. And we are also advised that our fixation with silent escapes can result in death by threats that could have been spotted otherwise. If one thinks of life, it may turn out that he or she receives death without putting up a fight. Whereas if one thinks of death and is ready to respond to its call, life may be, paradoxically, the reward one receives. I have, for inspiration, and as a door to the reality of people, a quote attributed to a Dwight L. Moody that alludes to the deceptive nature of human appearances. He says, "Character is what you are in the dark." This quote asserts that overt behavior, attributes in speech, do not carry as much weight in character assessments as what an individual does when nobody is watching. Only in the absence from the theater of life and its audiences may one truly know what a person is like, or who someone really is at the core. This is to say that humans have the proclivity to hide parts of themselves behind social masks, an obstacle that intelligence agents have dealt with in their assessments of human character for literally thousands of years. This is evidenced by ancient Chinese texts like the Dadai Li Ji, or Book of Rites of Dai, and the Shuo Shuo, or Lost Book of Zhao. Along with an abundance of intriguing information regarding the use of envoys, spies, and networks of informants, these texts instruct us to observe what is concealed by following the traces of what is hidden through the overt or manifest actions and attributes of the person in question. What is hidden is yin, or in the Japanese context, it would be in, and what is readily observed is yang, or in the Japanese context, yo. And seeing that these opposites influence and depend on one another, it follows that studying what is in the open can lead inference to what is closed off in the dark. The aforementioned Chinese sources state, there are many who conceal their emotions, who adorn themselves with artifice in order to seek fame. There are those who hide in humanness and substance, in knowledge and principle, those who hide in culture and art, in purity and courage, in loyalty and filiality, and even in friendship. Such cases must be investigated. For the intelligence components of feudal Japan, we find similar attention given to the ways of knowing what a person is like at the core. For example, within the Shoninki of 1681, attributed to shinobi and samurai notorious Anjuro Mazazumi, ninja were instructed to cultivate the means of knowing the minds of others by first studying their own psychology, indicating that a brutally honest awareness of self and how one's mind operates and reacts is vital to seeing into the dark mental sphere of others. This constitutes a pragmatic example of how Sun Tzu's admonition to know oneself and the enemy was reified in the world of the ninja. The Shoninki reads, "You must observe your own mind as it is given to you by heaven and see where it is out of balance. By observing the imbalances of your mind, such as whether you are greedy, given over to delight, anger, sorrow, pleasure, or even evil thoughts, you become adept at seeing the signs of these imbalances in others. The nature of the targeted mind can thus be read in this way." How do you know you are being followed? Do you look over your shoulder? Maybe use the screen of that tracking device in your pocket as a mirror to the six? Do you stop and stare idly into a store window or catch a reflection of a passing car? Who or what are you looking for? Is it a face that tends to show up in crowds at an unusual frequency? That cream-colored sedan that has made one too many passes in your area? How do you pick up on physical surveillance? This topic is one of interest, for the art of ninjutsu has a subdiscipline comprised of surveillance activities and skills. Take Junin, Joenin, and Jogenin, three ancient methods of the shinobi used to follow their surveillance targets that is mentioned in the 1681 text called the Shoninki. Junin is translated as obedient ninjutsu, and it is all about following a target without giving the target any sense that he or she is being monitored. Though the details of this skill are lost, we can infer quite a bit about it by the fundamentals of surveillance detection. Prior to the existence of electronic techniques, surveillance was conducted on foot. The target would have been in relatively close proximity to the shinobi agent so that information of the situation could reach his or her senses. The target is made aware of unsolicited surveillance if eye contact with the shinobi is established for prolonged periods, or if a pattern in the senses emerges that holds the presence of the shinobi as a consistent variable in the target's experience. Think about it. You're in a marketplace and some stranger has some kind of fixation on you. This is going to garner your attention. Obviously, obedient ninjutsu would require that the ninja avoid eye contact or making his presence in an area as a watcher obvious. Hence, the disguises of Shichihode in the Shoninki, such as a Kamuso monk, which permits the shinobi to conceal the eyes and face with an amigasa hat, and not stand out due to the costume's pairing with what was normative in the culture at the time. However, the clothing selected would have to match up with every location the target traveled to, meaning a preliminary surveillance of where the target goes would have already needed to be established to inform on cover selection. The modern equivalent of obedient ninjutsu would be found in electronic internet devices that we use every day. The use of these devices is now normal in our world, and an intelligence asset versed in siphoning data from these devices would be able to do so without the target ever being aware. This corresponds with obedient ninjutsu. With obedient ninjutsu proper, a shinobi gains intelligence on where a person goes, who they interact with, and what they say. It would be useful in instances where the target has taken up security measures that make tracking through electronic means impossible. This is all the same with Juei-nin, or shadow ninjutsu, the main distinction being that the shinobi follows a target by moving from shadow to shadow or hiding behind, beneath, above, or within objects. Unlike obedient ninjutsu, shadow ninjutsu requires stealth movement and proprioception that helps in navigating darkness. The advantage of shadow ninjutsu is that it does not require a disguise. This type of ninjutsu is all about stealth and in jutsu as opposed to yo jutsu. Its use implies the presence of darkness or long shadows in the environment. Use of Juei-nin today would require a knowledge of how artificial light sources produce shadows when they are used, and how to use this to the advantage of the observer. Unlike the historical environment of a shinobi-no-mono, darkness these days will likely be populated with the lights of civilization, making this type of ninjutsu more difficult to use. However, from the targeted individual's perspective, this is an advantage, because car lights and the like will have to be used by surveillance teams traveling by car, unless they're using night vision for whatever reason. Juei-nin training would require darkness adaptation and familiarity of an area by daylight to prepare for the fall of shadows. Joge-nin, translated to mean disguise or mutation ninjutsu, is a method of interacting with the surveillance target by pretending to be an individual of little consequence to his or her life, getting the guard down by seeming in need of help and appealing to the social pressure to assist someone in need. This type of ninjutsu is used extensively today by people of all sorts: criminals, law enforcement, intelligence operatives, and even the average citizen. Using social engineering, that is, manipulating outcomes of conversation through the employment of false narratives and cover identities, one can gain a great deal of information from an unsuspecting target. The way to defend against a shinobi using these methods of surveillance and elicitation is pretty simple. One must simply learn to assume that unsolicited interactions may be malicious in nature. Trust should not be readily extended, and one must keep the senses open for those trying to hide their eyes within the crowd, or stepping within the shadows. And the best value pertaining to privacy that we may gain from these ninjutsu surveillance methods is this: shinobi didn't use computers. This is something to ponder.